All right, Jeremiah 25, let's call this one No Refuge, and never forget to give thanks to God. As this chapter relatively, I guess more or less famously divides up into two, like I said already, it's a little bit redundant, but two famous illustrations. One, the 70 years, that is the clear statement that God has been alluding to, that they're going into captivity for a limited period of time. Here he's going to tell them it's a 70-year captivity in the first 14 verses, going on in the latter half of the chapter, verses 15 through 38, to talk about the cup of judgment from which all nations are going to have to drink, starting with his people, Judah. Verses 1 through 7, though, are going to start out with a call to all Judah for a word that all Judah will get to hear. The distinction being, there is a word for you that is not necessarily for you to hear. This is a word that is both for Judah, that is for all to hear. It came in the 4th year of King Jehoiakim, but the 1st year of King Nebuchadnezzar, who is going to be super important in this part of the story because he is the one who is going to be executing judgment primarily for God against Judah. Jeremiah will go on to say that from the 13th year of Josiah's reign until now, for 23 years, he has spoken to them, but they would not listen, just as the prophets that God sent to them spoke to them, but they would not listen. In verses 8 through 14, he will go on to say, therefore, the tribes of the north with Nebuchadnezzar will be ending the joy in Judah and Jerusalem. The land will be a waste. They will go into captivity for 70 years. Then he will punish Babylon and the nations according to their deeds. Marking the end of the first section, going on to describe that judgment in verses 15 through the end of the chapter. Verses 15 through 16, first off, are going to say, take this cup, Jeremiah, to the nations to whom I send you. So in verses 17 through 26, Jeremiah is going to say, so I took it to them, listing an itemized or giving an itemized list of nations that he is going to take the cup to, ending with Babylon. Going on in verse 27 to say, be drunk and stagger because of the sword of the Lord. Verse 28 saying, if they will not drink, tell them they do not have a choice. Why? Because in verse 29, if he has repaid his people, Judah, for the wrongs that they have done, you can only guess what's going to happen to the rest of the nations. Verses 30 through 33, saying that the cup of the wine of his wrath is coming around to all kingdoms. Judgment is coming to all flesh, but the sword is coming to the wicked, who will once again be strung out like dung on the ground. Except this time it's not a metaphor. He's literally saying the wicked will be dung on the ground, as he finishes in verses 34 through 38, calling the shepherds of Judah to wail because their day has come, a day in which they will have no refuge and no escape. For the Lord is coming out of his lair like a lion in his fierce anger. No refuge seeming to be an appropriate title for this chapter, because beyond the elders and leaders of Judah, there was no refuge for Babylon in its power. There was no refuge for the nations in their proximity or their distance from the drama, meaning even though ground zero for God's judgment was Jerusalem, there was no safety in being on the other end of the globe. Why? Because God was judging character. And so likewise, the things that he was judging in Judah, the things that provided no refuge for anyone, great or small, whether it was the spin that allowed them to deflect responsibility, the heroes in which they put their hope for salvation, or the alliances they formed with those who seemed to have clout and authority. We're likewise going to provide no refuge for anyone, anywhere on the globe, in much the same way we see God promising judgment in the Revelation. Which all reminds me of the days back in the day when I used to play paintball. And starting out, I would find refuge in things that just were not refuge. Things that seemed like they were shelter, but to experienced players, they were simply places they would go to pick off the new people. And I had to learn by example that not everything that appears to be shelter or refuge is actually refuge. And so just as over time, experience and more experienced players helped me understand where genuine refuge might be found, Jeremiah 25 reminds me of the way in which God is trying to convince us to allow him to counsel us into finding genuine, enduring, let me quit playing around, eternal refuge